The city of Paris is planning on making this Olympics one of the cheapest ever. Before this, the Summer Olympics in Rio cost an estimated $25 billion. Other cities like Tokyo spent an estimated $14 billion, while London spent $17 billion. What's really interesting is that none of these cities were able to make a profit from this big investment. But Paris wants to take a different route. The city is only planning on spending $9 billion on this current Olympics, and half of this will be on infrastructure while the other half will be running the operations. Basically, the city wants to be as frugal as possible since in modern times, hosting an Olympic is always seen as a bad deal. In fact, many cities are saddled with debt after hosting the Olympics. The Montreal mayor Jean Drapeu in 1964 even claimed that the Olympics can no more lose money than a man can have a baby. Instead, the city ended up with $1.6 billion of debt, which was finally paid off in December 2006, roughly 42 years later.
I'm always so curious about why countries even host the Olympics in the first place. It seems like a lose-lose proposition.
And Paris does not want a repeat of this. The 2024 Olympics include dramatic budget cuts, for example, fewer operational days for the Olympic Village. They will also be mostly using existing stadiums to host the events instead of building new ones. And no city has been able to make a profit since the 1984 Summer Olympics in Los Angeles. And this year, Paris wants to prove that you can make money hosting the Olympics during this modern time. And will the city be able to change the perspective that hosting the Olympics is a losing proposition? And how will the 2024 Olympics look from an economic perspective? I want to show you what the city of Paris now looks like from the ground level just before the Olympics.
Things are really nice around the Eiffel Tower. I would say it's completely different from what I saw a couple years ago.
And I want you guys to see exactly where Paris is spending its money and understand from a practical level what the city has added for this event. There is an obvious increase in security the moment that you arrive in Paris. There are police officers everywhere in the city. This fact is especially true around key monuments such as the Eiffel Tower or the Louvre. In total, France has equipped the city with 45,000 police and soldiers as well as 50,000 private contractors. And it's spending roughly $350 million in security in order to protect itself from any incoming threats. And American police departments for the first time are lending a hand to this overseas Olympics. This includes officers from New York, Los Angeles, and even Fairfax County where I'm from. And this investment has paid off since it's giving people a better overall experience in Paris.
There's no more scammers around the Eiffel Tower. They basically barricaded everything off.
When I first visited the city a couple years ago, there were obvious scammers around key monuments as well as simply around the city. They patrol popular areas looking for victims. This included the bracelet scam. A random person would simply put a bracelet on your wrist, refuse to take it back, and then they would demand some sort of outrageous sum. And this doesn't even include some of the legendary pickpockets that are often found in Paris. The city is infamous for how good and how skilled these individuals are, and they often work in teams. One would distract you while the other took your stuff. Restaurants will warn you, and other tourists I've met who experienced similar things will also warn you. The truth is, Paris is on another level when it comes to scam as well as pickpockets. However, many of these bad actors are now pushed out of Paris, at least where many of the visitors visit. Roughly 1 in 8 people worldwide will see Paris on their television, and the city will do whatever it can to ensure good publicity from this event. In fact, it's important for the city to deter any threats from other countries and organizations. As a result, Paris is simply not taking any chances this year. And the city even spent $150 million adding cybersecurity. In addition to this, on a personal level, I also noticed many more toilets than ever before.
I see one here, another one over there. And it looks like they're finally trying to address some of the issues.
And they have added these toilets around popular locations around the city, accommodating more than 50 million tourists who are expected to arrive during the summer. And from my experience, Paris has always had a problem with toilets and bathrooms. Before the Olympics, it was very hard to find a restroom, especially free ones around the city. And this is especially true at night as people drink. The lack of toilets as well as a culture around relieving yourself outside has made Paris smell like pee in many areas and spots. And I guess the city has finally decided to address these issues for the upcoming Summer Olympics. Many bathrooms are now added around the city, although I still see long lines forming in some restrooms. And if you're visiting Paris during the Olympics, make sure to be careful about your fluid intake. Sometimes it can still be pretty hard to find a restroom.
Okay guys, so it's been, I would say, a 15-minute walk, and we found our first urinal.
And lastly, they also turned Paris into sort of a maze for tourists to move around. You can see fences around the city to guide people from one location to another. These fences are put in place as part of the massive security preparation, and you'll see this around the Eiffel Tower as well as popular locations. And lanes of traffic are also blocked off for the summer events. As you move around the city, you can also see hints of the Olympics being ran. Paris teddy bears are dropped off at hotels as well as shops, and many monuments have also added the Olympic rings to promote the event. And the streets are often patrolled and the infrastructure is added to accommodate for the event. This was simply my experience while visiting the city, and all these things add a nice touch and even security and comfort to this Paris Games. And yet this makes up a fraction of the cost of actually hosting the Olympics. Capital expenditure is at the heart of what truly makes an Olympic so expensive. Past Olympics have tried to rely on building new structures. Instead, this year, Paris is simply taking a page from more frugal cities. The organizing committee has stated that everyone has been conscious of every euro that is spent, and we should be careful not to spend any euros on things that are superficial. And frankly, that is a challenge in itself. Paris is mostly using existing structure like the 1984 game where LA turned a profit of $250 million. This year, the organizers are relying mostly on existing venues, and these include those built for the annual French Open, as well as the 2016 European Football Championship. And relying on these venues is one of the best ways that Paris has been able to cut the cost down. In fact, only 3 structures have been built specifically for this Olympic. The Aquatic Center in St. Denis for the water events, the Porte de la Chapelle Arena for badminton and gymnastics, and the city's new Olympic Village for the 15,000 athletes arriving at the events. Together, these 3 projects have a budget of around $4.9 billion, roughly half the overall cost which the organizers are hoping to spend on this event. And the rest of the Olympics will take place in existing sports stadiums around Paris. And as you can see, the most expensive part of hosting the Olympics is having the right infrastructure. In 2014, Sochi had very little infrastructure before hosting the Olympics. Workers built 2,500 new hotel rooms, 255 miles of road, and 22 tunnels in the mountains. They also built 4 new stadiums and more, and this total bill amounted to roughly $50 billion. Today, most of these infrastructures are simply rotting away since there was truly never a demand for these structures. And once everybody left, the locals really didn't have any use for them. Other than this, France also agreed to offer bonuses and other incentives to public workers, and this is done to avoid strikes. The other $4.9 billion is spent on planning, organizing, and actually delivering the event. This includes welcoming the delegations as well as what you see on TV. What's really interesting is that cleaning the Seine River was not in the Olympic budget. This cost of roughly $1.5 billion, a pretty hefty price tag, was off the books. And this includes removing E. coli as well as other microorganisms. They overhaul the sewage processing across the region, and they also encourage at least 10,000 rural households and boat owners upstream of Paris to stop dumping toilet waste into the river. This was something that Paris already needed to do, and the Olympics was a perfect excuse. The Seine River has a dirty reputation, and swimming in the river has been banned, at least officially, since 1923. And this time, the organizers of the event did not use the Olympics as an excuse to spurge. And so far, Paris basically spent money on things it would have anyways, and compared to other countries, this budget is so much smaller. Rather, they plan to keep costs low by reusing venues as well as materials. And overall, Paris has given half of its budget to the 2014 organizing committee who manages the competition tickets and security, and the other half goes to Solidio who took care of the infrastructure. And in total, hosting the Olympics will cost Paris roughly $9 billion plus an extra $1.5 for cleaning the Seine River. However, the real question here is, can Paris actually generate a profit from spending so much money? One thing I find really interesting is who actually is making money from the Olympics. And what's really fascinating is that airlines might not be it. For example, plane tickets are now cheaper than ever compared to weeks ago when I made the purchase. And a pair of tickets cost me roughly $1,800 for the both of us, or $900 a piece. And today there's even tickets online for less than $400 round trip. Most international travelers are actually avoiding Paris during the summer. Instead, there's many more sport travelers as well as domestic French visitors. And it's estimated that roughly 64% of the people going to the Olympics in Paris are French. And these travelers actually have different needs as well as wants in Paris. Local press have even reported that certain sectors such as luxury sale have to worry about selling fewer handbags than normal. And much of this is thanks to the decline of Chinese tourists who often buy these stuff anyways. And American tourists in general want a less stressful summer vacation, and they have instead chosen to go to spots like Spain, Britain, and Ireland this summer. And it looks like there's certain losers and winners when it comes to hosting the Summer Olympics. And even though getting to Paris might now be much less expensive, it doesn't mean that your trip will be cheap at all. And many hotels and rental homes actually plan to retire from the influx of sport as well as local travelers. And about a week ago, I spent roughly $100 a night in Paris in mid-July. And this was before the Olympics officially started. And the prices now for some of these locations are roughly $300 to $500 for a night. And this is even true in less polished neighborhoods like the 18th or 19th district. And students have even been kicked off of campus to make way for Olympic staff. And rent has overall soared. Everything in the city is basically much more expensive than ever before. And the city itself has even doubled the price of its public metros. And the roads are much more congested due to the blockage and event planning, and this makes making trips for taxi drivers much more extensive and long, although they can charge double the price. And it's estimated that tourism overall will bring roughly $3 billion into the city of Paris. And they will spend money whether or not they have tickets to the games itself, according to the Paris Tourism Office. Each traveler is expected to pay at least $5,000 to attend, and this cost includes hotel, airfares, and even event tickets, and some of these will result in a good amount of change for the shops and local businesses. However, the Paris Games is at heart where the city will generate most of its income, and these includes domestic sponsorships, ticketing, licensing, hospitality, and merchandising. Paris 2024 has secured significant sponsorship deals in the categories that don't compete with the Olympic partner sponsors, and they can expect to generate roughly $1.23 billion from domestic sponsorships. As of April 2024, NBC reported $1.2 billion of domestic ad sales for the Paris Games. Ticket sales are also anticipated to contribute at least $1.34 billion more to the Paris 2024 budget, with more than 10 million tickets sold priced between $24 to $980. And the most expensive events include athletics, basketball, and swimming. Hospitality at these games are also extremely important, with corporations, government hosting customers, VIPs, etc. Licensing and merchandising are also extremely critical as well, ranging from apparels to memorabilia. Together, these sectors are expected to generate $1.5 billion in revenue. But all of this gets much more complex than what you really see. 90% of the committee's service providers are French, and nearly 181,000 people are working or will be working roles connected to the games. And this means that the economy in Paris overall will benefit from hosting. And an independent study trotted by the IOC concluded that the Paris Games will end up generating between $7.3 to $12.1 billion for the city and the surrounding areas between 2018 to 2034. And the big gains here are really coming from tourism, construction, and the organization of the games itself. But how true can this really be? And the problem with numbers like these is that these predictions are almost always optimistic. Paris is already one of the top tourist destinations in the world, and many talk about sport tourism simply crowding out others who would normally visit anyways. And would Paris and the city around Paris already generate similar amount of money without the presence of the Olympics? Who knows? And it's hard to say, but historically speaking, the Olympics don't add much to tourism, especially after the event is over. The Beijing 2008 Summer Olympics only made $3.6 billion but cost over $40 billion. And Tokyo's delayed Summer Games made $5.8 billion but cost $13 billion. And also, much of the revenue don't go to the host itself. The International Olympic Committee keeps almost half of all TV revenue, and this is typically the largest chunk of money from the games itself. Last month, the Paris Olympic Committee expects to at least break even, and even stating that they might make a small profit from staging the events. And the University of Limoges reports that the 2024 Olympics will benefit Paris, and the net economic gains will be nearly $12.2 billion. If Paris were able to achieve these results, it would be the first time since 1984. And this success has not been repeated in cities like London or Beijing. In fact, they all experienced lower rates of tourism after hosting the Olympic Games. And a study of the effects of tourism after events like this between 1995 to 2019 showed that typically expenditure tends to tip over the original budget, while the revenue side indicators are rarely achieved. However, whether or not Paris actually makes a tiny profit or break even might not matter as much. The investments from the Olympics are used in sport transportation, housing, and sports facilities, and they are expected to improve the lives of residents long after the Olympics are over. It even included the construction of the Olympic villages as well as the new sports facilities. These projects are expected to leave a long-lasting legacy, providing housing and amenities long after the games conclude. And the games itself might also result in substantial income for hotels, restaurants, and local businesses. The games has created thousands of jobs, both temporary as well as permanent, and they range from construction workers, event staff to hospitality and security guards. And the French finance minister said that before the recent election that he wanted the games to be the most economical in decades. And on July 26, an estimated 1 billion people globally will watch the opening ceremony of the Paris 2024 Summer Olympic Games. And over 10,000 athletes from over 200 countries will compete. And let all of this sink in for a moment. All eyes are going to be on Paris, whether it's good or bad. And no matter what, Paris will be the topic of conversation for the next few months. And the event's initial budget was set at $6.9 billion in 2018, but the French government has raised it twice to $9 billion in 2022 and roughly around 10 this year. And out of this, the people of Paris are estimated to be on hook for $3.25 billion. And some researchers predict that each dollar spent will result in $3 back. And how true can this really be? I guess we'll find out. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. I hope you guys enjoy. Make sure to like and subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next videos.